The rain had stopped an hour before they lowered her into the ground. Takeshi Yamada stood at the edge of the grave with his hands folded behind his back, watching the mahogany casket descend into earth that smelled of wet clay and rotting leaves. Around him, 200 people in black held umbrellas they no longer needed. None of them wept. They knew better. His wife had been dead for 3 days. He had not cried once. Not when the doctors told him the cancer had reached her brain. Not when she stopped recognizing his face. Not when her breathing finally thinned to nothing in the slate-gray hours before dawn. He had sat beside her bed with his hand over hers, feeling the pulse slow beneath papery skin, and when the nurses came to take her body, he had simply stood, straightened his cuffs, and walked out of the room. Now, as the priest murmured words Takeshi didn't hear, he studied the arrangement of white lilies draped across the casket. Miharu had loved lilies. She had kept them in crystal vases throughout the house, on the mantel, the dining table, her vanity. After she died, he'd had every vase removed and stored in the basement. The house felt larger without them. Colder. Better. The service ended. People approached to offer condolences with bowed heads and carefully chosen words. Takeshi received them all with the same measured nod, the same 2 sentences. "Thank you for coming." She would have been grateful. His second-in-command, a square-jawed man named Tanaka, hovered at his shoulder, scanning the crowd with the practiced vigilance of someone who knew that funerals were excellent places for ambushes, but no one here would dare. Not today. Not at Miharu's grave. When the last mourner had shuffled away, only 3 figures remained: Takeshi, Tanaka, and an elderly woman in a charcoal kimono standing 10 feet to his left. His mother. Reiko Yamada had not spoken to him since the burial began. She stood with her spine straight and her hands folded at her waist, staring not at the grave, but at something beyond it. Perhaps the line of cherry trees at the cemetery's edge, their branches still bare from winter. Takeshi turned to her. "We should go." She didn't move. "Mother." Reiko's gaze shifted. Slowly, deliberately, she looked at her son with eyes that held the weight of 7 decades and the sharpness of cut glass. "I had a dream," she said. Takeshi's jaw tightened. He did not believe in dreams. He believed in ledgers, in bullets, in the precise architecture of fear. Dreams were for children and fools. Not now. 3 nights ago, Reiko continued, as if he hadn't spoken. The night Miharu passed. The rain began again, a fine mist, barely more than fog. Takeshi glanced at Tanaka, who took the cue, and stepped back toward the black sedan parked on the cemetery's gravel path. His mother remained motionless, unbothered by the moisture gathering in her silver hair. "What did you dream?" Takeshi asked, his voice flat. Reiko's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something ancient and unshakable. "I saw you standing in a garden," she said. "The house was behind you, the one your father built." Takeshi waited. "In your arms, you held a child. Not yours, not hers." She paused. "But yours, nonetheless." "I have no children." "Not yet." The mist thickened. Somewhere beyond the trees, a crow cawed. "After great loss," Reiko said quietly, "comes a gift. That is the way of things. You will be given what you did not ask for, what you did not want, and it will bring with it blood." Takeshi felt something cold settle in his chest, not fear, but recognition. His mother had always possessed an unsettling prescience, a way of knowing things before they unfolded. His father used to joke that she could smell the future the way dogs smelled storms. "Where?" he asked, surprising himself. Reiko tilted her head, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. "Where filth is discarded," she said. "Where the unwanted are left to rot." Then she turned and walked toward the car, her footsteps silent on the wet grass. Takeshi stood alone at his wife's grave for another moment, staring at the mound of fresh earth. He thought of Miharu's laugh, bright and unexpected, like sunlight through smoke. He thought of the way she used to touch his face when he came home late, her fingers tracing the tension in his jaw as if she could smooth it away. She had been the only softness in his life. Now she was gone. He turned and followed his mother to the car. The drive back to the estate took 40 minutes. Takeshi sat in the rear seat beside his mother, staring out the tinted window as the city slid past in shades of gray and neon. The rain had picked up again, drumming against the roof in a steady rhythm that made thought feel distant and muffled. Beside him, Reiko sat in silence, her hands folded in her lap. In the driver's seat, Kenji, Takeshi's personal driver for the past 15 years, navigated the slick roads with the calm efficiency of someone who had learned long ago not to ask questions. Kenji was 62, lean as wire, and utterly loyal. He had driven Takeshi's father before him. He would drive Takeshi until one of them died. They were halfway through the warehouse district when Kenji slowed the car. "Boss," he said quietly. Takeshi looked up. Ahead, on the right side of the road, was a stretch of chain-link fence bordering an industrial dump. Mounds of trash bags, rusted machinery, and broken pallets rose behind the fence like a monument to decay. The rain made everything glisten. "What is it?" Takeshi asked. Kenji pointed. At the base of the fence, just visible through the downpour, was a wicker basket. Takeshi's pulse didn't quicken. He had seen bodies in baskets before, severed heads, threats wrapped in silk. But something about the shape of it, small, humble, incongruous, made him lean forward. "Stop the car." Kenji obeyed without hesitation, pulling to the shoulder. The engine idled. Takeshi opened the door and stepped into the rain. It soaked through his suit jacket immediately, cold and relentless. He walked toward the basket with slow, deliberate steps, his dress shoes splashing through shallow puddles. Behind him, he heard Kenji's door open, then close. The basket sat tilted against the fence, half submerged in mud. Takeshi crouched beside it. Inside, wrapped in a length of wet silk, was a baby. A girl. She couldn't have been more than a few days old. Her skin was a rich, warm brown, mixed heritage, he guessed immediately, and her tiny fists were curled against her chest. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't moving. For a long moment, Takeshi simply stared. Then the baby's mouth opened and she let out a weak, rattling cry. Alive. Takeshi reached into the basket without thinking. His hands that had broken bones, signed death warrants, held his wife as she died, slid beneath the infant's fragile body and lifted her free. The silk clung to her skin, soaked through. She weighed almost nothing. He stood, cradling her against his chest. Behind him, Kenji approached, his face unreadable. "Boss? Get a blanket from the car." Kenji hesitated for only a fraction of a second, then turned and jogged back to the sedan. Takeshi looked down at the baby in his arms. Her eyes had opened. Dark, unfocused, ancient in the way newborns' eyes always were. She was shivering. Dying, probably. Hypothermia. Exposure. Abandonment. He should leave her. He should walk away. Get back in the car. Let the rain finish what neglect had started. Instead, he pulled her closer, shielding her from the downpour with his body. Kenji returned with a wool blanket. Takeshi let him wrap it around the infant, then turned and carried her to the car. Reiko was watching through the rear window. When Takeshi slid into the seat beside her, the baby still in his arms, his mother's expression remained perfectly calm. She looked at the child, then at her son. "So it begins," she said softly. Takeshi said nothing. "Drive," he told Kenji. The car pulled back onto the road and the dump disappeared behind them in the rain. The Yamada estate sat on 12 acres of meticulously maintained land in the hills north of the city. High stone walls, iron gates, guard posts disguised as gardeners' sheds. The house itself was a sprawling fusion of traditional Japanese architecture and cold modern luxury. Low-pitched roofs, floor-to-ceiling windows, dark wood and granite. Miharu had hated it. "It feels like a museum," she'd said once. Or a tomb. Takeshi had never disagreed. By the time they arrived, the baby had stopped crying. She lay still in Takeshi's arms, her breathing shallow but steady. Reiko had disappeared into the house without a word. Kenji held the door open as Takeshi carried the infant inside. "Call Dr. Sato," Takeshi said. "Tell him to come immediately, and tell him to keep his mouth shut." "Yes, boss." Takeshi walked through the foyer, marble floors, sparse furniture, everything clean and untouched, and into the sitting room. He lowered himself onto the leather couch and looked down at the baby. She was staring at him, not crying, not fussing, just watching, as if trying to decide whether he was a threat. He didn't know what to do with his hands. Dr. Sato arrived within the hour. He was a short, balding man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and the nervous energy of someone who lived in constant awareness of whose money kept his practice afloat. He set his bag on the coffee table, washed his hands in the adjacent bathroom, and examined the infant with swift, practiced efficiency. Takeshi watched in silence. After 20 minutes, Dr. Sato straightened and removed his gloves. "She'll live," he said. Takeshi felt something unclench in his chest. "She's dehydrated and mildly hypothermic, but nothing irreversible. I've started an IV drip. She'll need round-the-clock care for the next 48 hours. Feeding every 2 hours, monitoring for infection. After that..." He trailed off, glancing at Takeshi uncertainly. "What are your plans for her, if I may ask?" Takeshi's gaze didn't leave the baby. "That's not your concern." Dr. Sato cleared his throat. "Of course, I'll arrange for a private nurse. Discreet." "Good. And the authorities?" "No authorities." The doctor nodded quickly. "Understood." After Dr. Sato left, Takeshi sat alone with the baby for a long time. She had fallen asleep in the makeshift bassinet the doctor had fashioned from a drawer and blankets. Her tiny chest rose and fell in a rhythm so delicate it felt like watching a bird breathe. He didn't understand what he was doing. He had no use for children. He had never wanted them. Miharu had miscarried twice, early in their marriage, and after the second time they'd stopped trying. It had been a relief, if he was honest. Children were liabilities, weaknesses, attachments that could be exploited. And yet, he reached out and touched the baby's hand. Her fingers curled reflexively around his thumb. Something in him shifted. It wasn't warmth, exactly. It wasn't joy. It was something older and more primal, a sense of claim. This fragile, unwanted thing had been placed in his path. His mother's dream had led him to her. Fate, or God, or simple coincidence, had delivered her into his hands. She was his now. He would protect her. He would raise her. And if anyone tried to take her, he would bury them. 3 days passed. The baby, still unnamed, grew stronger under the care of the nurse, a middle-aged woman named Haruna, who asked no questions and kept impeccable records. Takeshi visited the nursery every few hours, standing in the doorway and watching the infant sleep, or feed, or stare at the ceiling with her wide, dark eyes. He didn't hold her again. He didn't trust himself to. On the 4th night, just after midnight, there was a knock on his study door. "Come." Kenji entered, his face grave. In his hands, he carried a folded piece of fabric. Takeshi set down the whiskey he'd been nursing and gestured for Kenji to approach. "What is it?" Kenji placed the fabric on the desk. It was the silk cloth the baby had been wrapped in, now cleaned and dried, its colors vivid under the study's lamplight. Takeshi frowned. "I told you to dispose of this." "I was going to," Kenji said quietly. "But then I noticed the pattern." Takeshi picked up the cloth. It was fine silk, hand-stitched, with an intricate border of deep crimson and gold thread. In the center, barely visible unless you knew what to look for, was a small embroidered emblem, a coiled serpent wrapped around a lotus flower. Takeshi's blood went cold. He knew that emblem. Everyone in the city knew that emblem. It belonged to the Zhao family. Specifically, it belonged to Vincent Zhao, the volatile, brilliant, utterly ruthless head of the city's second-largest criminal empire. A man Takeshi had been locked in a silent, simmering rivalry with for the better part of a decade. The two of them had never gone to war. Not openly. But they circled each other like wolves, each waiting for the other to show weakness. They controlled different territories, different trades. They maintained a brittle peace because full-scale conflict would cost both of them too much. But this... Takeshi stared at the scarf, his mind racing. The baby had been wrapped in Zhao family silk. The baby had been left where Takeshi would find her. This was not an accident. Kenji, he said slowly. Are you certain? Kenji nodded. I had it verified. That pattern, those colors, they're exclusive. Custom made for the Zhao household. There are only a handful of scarves like this in existence. Takeshi's grip on the fabric tightened. Does Zhao know? I don't know, boss. But if the child is his... Takeshi set the scarf down and stood, walking to the window. Outside, the estate grounds stretched into darkness. Rain streaked the glass. He thought of the baby sleeping upstairs, her brown skin, her mixed heritage, the way she had looked at him that first night, as if she could see something in him no one else ever had. He thought of his mother's dream. After great loss comes a gift. It will bring blood. Behind him, Kenji spoke quietly. Boss. This isn't coincidence. Takeshi's reflection stared back at him from the dark window. That child belongs to your enemy. For a long time, Takeshi said nothing. Then, without turning, he spoke. Then God didn't give me a gift. He exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the glass. He gave me a war. Vincent Zhao didn't believe in God, but he believed in omens. The scar ran from his left hip to just below his ribcage, a pale, puckered line that caught the light when he moved. 6 months old, still tender when the weather changed. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. The bullet had torn through soft tissue, nicked his intestine, and exited clean. Another inch to the right, and it would have shredded his liver. Lucky. He stood naked in front of the floor-length mirror in his penthouse bedroom, studying the damage. The scar was ugly, functional, a reminder that even he could bleed. But it wasn't the scar that kept him awake at night. It was what the doctors had told him 3 weeks after the surgery, once the infection had cleared and the stitches had dissolved. The trauma caused internal complications, severe adhesions. We did what we could, but... sterile. Permanently. Vincent had listened to the news with his hands folded in his lap, his face blank. He'd thanked the doctor, signed the discharge papers, walked out of the hospital and driven himself home. Then he'd gone to his study, locked the door, and put his fist through the antique mahogany desk his grandfather had brought from Shanghai. He was 38 years old. He would never have children. The Zhao line, unbroken for 7 generations, carried across oceans and wars and revolutions, would end with him. Unless... Vincent turned from the mirror and pulled on a black silk robe. His bedroom was all glass and steel, minimalist to the point of sterility. No photographs, no personal effects, just clean lines and expensive emptiness. He walked to the bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of Macallan, neat. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He picked it up. A text from his head of security, a razor-thin man named Chen. Found something. Coming up. Vincent set the glass down untouched. Chen arrived 5 minutes later, letting himself in with the key code. He was holding a tablet, his expression carefully neutral. Well? Vincent asked. Chen tapped the screen and turned it toward him. We tracked her. The screen showed a surveillance photo, a narrow apartment building in the city's East End. Cracked concrete steps, peeling paint. The kind of place where people disappeared and no one asked questions. This is where she was living, Chen said. Apartment 4C, lease under the name Amara Ochieng. Vincent stared at the photo. Amara. The name tasted bitter in his mouth. He'd met her 11 months ago at a private club in the financial district, one of those places where the lighting was low and the music was just loud enough to drown out conversation. She'd been bartending. New to the city, new to the country. Kenyan, she'd said. Nairobi. She had a student visa and a degree in economics and eyes that held more intelligence than her job required. Vincent had been there with business associates. He'd watched her work. Efficient, graceful, unintimidated by the men who leaned across the bar and tried to impress her with their watches and their accents. When the bar closed, he'd sent everyone else home and waited. They'd talked for an hour, then less talking, then his car, then his bed. One night. That was all it had been. He'd made that clear. No promises. No complications. She'd nodded, dressed, and left before sunrise. 3 weeks later, she'd called him. "I'm pregnant." Vincent had gone very still on the other end of the line. "How far along?" 6 weeks. "Are you certain it's mine?" A long silence. Then, "Yes." He'd told her what to do. Calmly, clearly, he would pay for the procedure. He would arrange for the best clinic. Discreet. Safe. She would be taken care of. "No," she'd said. "Excuse me?" "I'm keeping it." Vincent's jaw had tightened. "We had one night. You don't know me. I don't know you. This is not a conversation." "Then don't have it," she'd said quietly. "But I'm not getting rid of my baby." She'd hung up. He'd tried calling back. No answer. He'd sent Chen to find her. By the time Chen located her apartment, she was gone. The lease was still active, but the place was empty. No forwarding address. No trace. Vincent had been furious, not because he wanted the child, but because he hated loose ends. He'd filed the problem away, assuming she'd either handled it herself or disappeared into whatever anonymous American life immigrants carved out for themselves. Then the shooting happened. Then the scar. Then the diagnosis. And suddenly, the child he'd demanded she destroy was the only child he would ever have. "When was this taken?" Vincent asked, still staring at the photo. 2 days ago, Chen said. "I had someone check the apartment. She's not there." Obviously. "But we found traces, blood in the sink, a broken lock on the door, signs of a struggle." Vincent's eyes narrowed. "How much blood?" "Not enough to be fatal, but enough to suggest injury." Vincent set the tablet down and walked to the window. Below, the city sprawled in every direction, a grid of light and shadow. Somewhere out there, Amara Ochieng was bleeding, hiding, running. From what? From him? "What about the child?" he asked. Chen hesitated. "That's the part you need to hear." Vincent turned. Chen pulled up another image on the tablet, a grainy screenshot from a traffic camera. The timestamp read 4 days ago. The image showed a black sedan stopped on the shoulder of a road near the industrial district. A man in a suit stood beside it, holding something wrapped in cloth. Vincent leaned closer. "Who is that?" Chen zoomed in. The man's face came into focus. Vincent's blood turned to ice. "Takeshi Yamada." "No," Vincent said softly. "One of our informants in the district saw the whole thing," Chen continued. "Said Yamada stopped his car, walked to a basket by the fence and pulled out a baby. Took it with him. The informant didn't think much of it until I started asking questions." Vincent's mind raced. Yamada had the child. Yamada, his rival, his mirror, the only other man in this city who commanded the kind of fear and respect Vincent did, had his daughter. "Does he know?" Vincent asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Know what?" "That she's mine." Chen shook his head. "I don't think so. He just lost his wife. Word is he's been holed up at his estate. If he took the baby, it might have been impulse." "Grief." Vincent laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Yamada doesn't do impulse." "Then what?" Vincent turned back to the window, his reflection overlaying the city below. What indeed? Yamada had taken his child. Whether he knew whose blood ran through her veins or not didn't matter. What mattered was that Vincent's daughter, His only chance at legacy was in the hands of the one man he could never ask for anything. "Find Amara," Vincent said. "We're trying. She's off the grid." "Try harder." Vincent's voice dropped. "And find out everything Yamada knows. I want eyes on his estate. I want to know how many guards he has, where the child sleeps, what route he takes when he leaves. I want to know if he pisses standing up or sitting down." Chen nodded. "And if he realizes who the child belongs to?" Vincent smiled. It was the kind of smile that made men check their exits. "Then we'll see if the old snake still has teeth." Vincent had first met Takeshi Yamada 7 years ago, at a neutral meeting brokered by the city's oldest fixer, a retired judge named Castellano who made his living keeping wolves from each other's throats. The meeting had been Castellano's idea. Two rising powers, too much overlap, too many near misses. "Sit down," the old man had said. "Draw your lines. Stay out of each other's way." Vincent had arrived at the designated warehouse with 6 men. Yamada had arrived with 2. The Japanese man had walked into the room like he owned the air inside it. Shoulders back, hands loose, eyes cold and measuring. He was older than Vincent by a decade, but he moved with the controlled economy of someone who had nothing left to prove. They'd sat across from each other at a folding table, under a single hanging bulb. Castellano had done most of the talking. Territories, operations, rules of engagement. Vincent had listened, bored. Yamada had said almost nothing. When Castellano finished, Vincent leaned back in his chair and studied the other man. "You don't say much," he'd observed. Yamada met his gaze without blinking. "I don't need to." Vincent had smiled. "Maybe that's why you're still alive." Maybe. They'd signed the agreement, shook hands, left without incident. But Vincent had felt it even then, the mutual recognition. 2 predators circling the same territory, smart enough not to fight, but not weak enough to submit. Respect, maybe, but also hunger. The truce had held for 7 years. Barely. There had been close calls, disputed shipments, a dock fire that might or might not have been arson. A missing courier who turned up in the river with his tongue cut out, but no open war, no blood, until now. Vincent spent the next 2 days preparing. He met with his captains, 8 men who ran different pieces of his empire. Drugs, weapons, extortion, real estate. He told them nothing specific, just to tighten security, watch for movement, be ready. They asked no questions, they knew better. On the 3rd day, Chen returned with news. "We found her." Vincent looked up from the documents he'd been reviewing. "Amara?" "Yes." "Where?" "She's at a shelter. St. Catherine's, on the south side. Run by a nun named Sister Lucia. She checked in 2 days ago under a fake name, but it's her." Vincent stood. "Condition?" "Injured, but stable. Someone worked her over. Bruised ribs, cuts on her hands and face. She's not talking to anyone. I'll go myself." Chen frowned. "Boss, that's not—" "I'll go myself," Vincent repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. An hour later, he was standing outside St. Catherine's shelter, a squat brick building wedged between a laundromat and a shuttered grocery store. The neighborhood smelled like grease and exhaust. A group of men sat on a nearby stoop, passing a bottle in a paper bag. Vincent walked inside. The lobby was dim and smelled faintly of bleach. A desk stood near the door, unmanned. From somewhere deeper in the building came the sound of children laughing. A door to his left opened, and a small woman in a gray habit emerged. She was maybe 60, with sharp eyes and the no-nonsense air of someone who had seen every kind of human misery and refused to be moved by most of it. "Help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for someone," Vincent said. "Amara Ochieng." The nun's expression didn't change. "We don't give out information about our residents." "I'm not asking for information, I'm asking to see her." "Are you family?" Vincent hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Yes." The nun studied him. His tailored coat, his expensive shoes, the controlled stillness in the way he stood. She didn't believe him, but she also didn't turn him away. "Wait here." She disappeared down a hallway. Vincent stood in the lobby, his hands in his pockets. He thought about the last time he'd seen Amara, the way she'd looked at him before she left his penthouse. Not with hurt, exactly. More like resignation, as if she'd known from the beginning that he was the kind of man who didn't keep anything soft. 5 minutes later, the nun returned. "She'll see you, but you've got 10 minutes, and I'm staying in the room." Vincent nodded. The nun led him down a narrow hallway to a small room with 2 chairs and a window that looked out onto a concrete courtyard. Amara sat in one of the chairs, wearing a donated sweater that was too big for her and jeans that looked like they'd been through a war. She looked up when he entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She looked thinner, older. Her left cheekbone was bruised, and there was a cut healing on her lower lip. But her eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes, were the same. "Vincent," she said quietly. He sat down across from her. "Amara." The nun positioned herself by the door, arms folded. "What happened to you?" Vincent asked. Amara's mouth twitched. "You care now?" "I'm asking." She looked away, toward the window. "Some men came to my apartment, a week after I stopped answering your calls. They didn't say who sent them. They just said I needed to get rid of the problem." Vincent's jaw tightened. "I didn't send anyone." "No?" She looked back at him. "Then who did?" He didn't answer. "They broke in while I was asleep," Amara continued, her voice flat. "Held me down. Told me if I didn't take care of it myself they would. I fought. They hit me." She touched her cheekbone. "Then they left. Said they'd be back." "And the baby?" Vincent asked. Amara's eyes hardened. "Gone." "Gone where?" "I don't know." "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying." Her voice rose slightly. "I delivered her alone in my bathroom 2 days later. Premature. She was so small I thought she'd die. I wrapped her in the only thing I had that was clean, a scarf my mother sent me. Then I left her somewhere I thought she'd be found." Vincent leaned forward. "Where?" Amara shook her head. "I don't know if she survived. I don't know if anyone found her. I left because those men were coming back. And if they found me with her, they'd kill us both." "Who were they?" Vincent demanded. "I don't know." Amara's voice cracked. "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you do. I don't know why men with guns would care about a bartender and her baby. But I know it has something to do with you." The nun stepped forward. "That's enough. You need to leave." Vincent ignored her. He kept his eyes on Amara. "The baby's alive," he said. Amara went very still. "What?" "She's alive. Someone found her." For the first time, emotion broke through Amara's carefully controlled expression. Her eyes filled. "Where is she?" Vincent stood. "That's what I'm going to find out." He walked to the door. "Vincent." He paused. "Please," Amara said, her voice breaking. "Please don't hurt her." Vincent looked back at her. "She's mine. I don't hurt what's mine." Then he left. Chen was waiting in the car outside. "Well?" he asked as Vincent slid into the back seat. "She doesn't know where the baby is, but I do." "Yamada." Vincent nodded. "And if those men weren't mine, and they weren't hers..." Chen's eyes widened. "You think Yamada sent them?" "No." Vincent's mind worked through the pieces. Yamada doesn't operate that way. He's methodical. If he wanted something from her, he'd have taken it clean. This was sloppy. Rushed. Then who? Vincent stared out the window at the gray city streets. "I don't know yet. But someone knew about the baby before I did. Someone wanted her gone. And when that failed, someone made sure she ended up exactly where she'd caused the most damage. With Yamada." "With Yamada." Chen shifted in the driver's seat. "What do you want to do?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. That same cold, hungry smile from 3 days ago. Prepare the city, he said softly. I'm taking back what's mine. He pulled out his phone and began making calls. The war was about to begin. The baby cried at 3 in the morning. Takeshi heard it from his study 2 floors below. A thin, insistent wail that cut through the silence of the estate like a knife. He set down the glass of whiskey he'd been nursing and listened. The crying stopped. Haruna, the nurse, would have it handled. She always did. He returned to the documents spread across his desk. Shipping manifests, account ledgers, a surveillance report on one of his captains who'd been skimming off the top. The usual machinery of empire. But his mind wouldn't settle. It had been 2 weeks since he'd found the child. 2 weeks since Kenji had shown him the Zhao family scarf. 2 weeks since he'd realized that the fragile, unwanted thing sleeping in his nursery belonged, by blood, to his enemy. He should have gotten rid of her. Quietly. Efficiently. Leave her at a hospital. Drop her at a church. Return her to whatever chaos had produced her and walk away clean. Instead, he'd kept her. He'd hired Haruna full-time. He'd had the nursery repainted. Soft gray walls, blackout curtains, a mobile of paper cranes that Maharu had made years ago and stored in the attic. He'd ordered clothes, formula, diapers, things he'd never needed to think about. Every night he told himself he would handle it tomorrow. Every morning he went to the nursery and watched the baby sleep. She was growing, thriving. Her skin had lost that grayish pallor of near death. Her eyes tracked movement now. When Haruna held her, the baby would grip the nurse's finger with startling strength. Takeshi had held her only once since that first night. 3 days ago, Haruna had been changing her and asked if he wanted to try. He'd said no. Then, inexplicably, he'd said yes. The baby had settled against his chest like she belonged there. Warm, trusting. Her tiny heartbeat pulsing against his ribs. She'd made a small sound, not quite a cry, not quite a coo, and closed her eyes. Takeshi had stood there for 20 minutes, barely breathing, terrified he would break her. When Haruna finally took her back, his arms felt empty. Now, alone in his study, he rubbed his face and tried to focus. The Zhao scarf was locked in his safe. He hadn't told anyone else about it, not Tanaka, not his captains. Only Kenji knew. And Kenji would die before he spoke. But silence wouldn't protect them forever. If Vincent Zhao learned that his child was here, if he even suspected, there would be blood. The door to the study opened. Takeshi looked up. His mother stood in the doorway, dressed in a pale robe, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She looked smaller at night, older. "You should sleep," she said. "So should you." Reiko crossed the room and sat in the chair across from his desk. She moved with the deliberate slowness of someone whose bones ached, but whose will remained unbroken. "She cries for you," Reiko said. Takeshi frowned. "Haruna handles the night feedings." "I'm not talking about milk." He said nothing. Reiko leaned forward slightly. "You visit the nursery 4 times a day. You stand in the doorway and watch her sleep. But you won't hold her. You won't name her. You won't let yourself love her. Love is a liability. Love is the only thing that matters." Takeshi's jaw tightened. "I know what she is, Mother. I know whose blood she carries. Keeping her here is already dangerous. Pretending she's mine would be insane." "Who said anything about pretending?" He looked at her sharply. Reiko's expression was calm, implacable. "She was brought to you," she said. "By fate. By God. By whatever force you choose to believe in. You didn't steal her. You didn't buy her. You saved her. That makes her yours. Blood doesn't work that way. Blood is an accident." Reiko's voice hardened. "What you do is a choice." Takeshi stood and walked to the window. Outside, the estate was dark except for the glow of security lights along the perimeter. Guards moved in slow patrols. Everything was controlled. Safe. "Vincent Zhao will come for her," he said quietly. "Then let him come. He'll bring war. And what will you bring? Takeshi turned. What does that mean? Reiko rose from her chair, moving toward him with that same eerie calm she'd had at Maharu's funeral. You've spent your whole life building walls, she said. Walls around this house. Walls around your empire. Walls around your heart. Miharu was the only one who ever breached them. And when she died, you sealed them tighter than before. Mother, that child upstairs is not a weapon. She is not a pawn. She is a test. A test of what? Reiko stopped in front of him. Her eyes, dark and ancient, held his. Of whether you're still human. The words landed like a blow. For a long moment, Takeshi said nothing. Then, quietly, what if I fail? Reiko's expression softened. Just slightly. Then we all do. She turned and left the study, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. Takeshi stood alone, staring at nothing. Then he walked upstairs to the nursery. Haruna was asleep in the chair beside the crib, her head tilted back, her breathing deep and even. The baby was awake, staring at the mobile of paper cranes turning slowly in the draft from the heating vent. Takeshi crossed the room and looked down into the crib. The baby turned her head toward him. Her eyes, dark, impossibly wide, locked onto his. She didn't cry, didn't fuss, just watched. Takeshi reached down and picked her up. She was heavier than before. Solid. Real. He held her against his chest, one hand cradling her head. She made a small sound and pressed her face against his shirt. Something cracked open inside him. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was the beginning of it. He sat down in the rocking chair by the window and looked out at the dark grounds. The baby's breathing slowed, her tiny fists uncurled. I don't know what to do with you, he whispered. The baby sighed. Takeshi closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he felt something like peace. The attacks began 4 days later. The first was subtle. A shipment of electronics meant for one of Takeshi's warehouses was seized by customs. No explanation, no warning, just gone. The second was less subtle. 2 of his street captains were jumped outside a nightclub in neutral territory. One ended up in the hospital with a shattered kneecap. The other disappeared. The third wasn't subtle at all. Someone firebombed a restaurant Takeshi owned in Chinatown. It was closed at the time, no casualties, but the message was clear. Takeshi sat in his office with Tanaka and 3 of his senior captains listening to reports. It's Zhao, Tanaka said flatly. Has to be. We don't know that, one of the captains argued. Could be the Koreans. They've been pushing into our territory for months. The Koreans don't have the balls, another captain said. This is coordinated, professional. It's Zhao. Takeshi listened in silence. He'd known this was coming. Ever since Kenji had shown him the scarf, he'd known. Vincent Zhao was many things. Volatile, dangerous, brilliant. But he wasn't patient. If he wanted something, he took it. And if he'd learned that Takeshi had his child... What do you want us to do, boss? Tanaka asked. Takeshi met his second-in-command's eyes. Nothing. The room went silent. Boss? Tanaka said carefully. We don't retaliate, not yet. With respect, one of the captains said. If we don't respond, we look weak. Then we look weak. The captains exchanged glances. Takeshi stood. Zhao is testing us, seeing if we'll bite. If we hit back now, we give him the excuse he wants. So we don't. We tighten security. We move shipments through secondary channels. We wait. Wait for what? Tanaka asked. For him to make his real move. The real move came a week later. Takeshi was in the garden behind the estate, walking the stone path that wound through carefully pruned pines and a koi pond Miharu had loved. The baby, still unnamed, was with him, strapped to his chest in a carrier Haruna had insisted he try. It felt absurd, undignified, like wearing a target. But the baby seemed to like it. She was awake, her eyes tracking the movement of leaves in the wind, her small hands grabbing at the fabric of his shirt. Takeshi found himself talking to her, quietly, about nothing. Your mother would have liked this garden, he said. Not your real mother. My wife. She spent hours out here, pruning, planting. She said it was the only place in this house that felt alive. The baby made a sound. You would have liked her too, Takeshi continued. She was gentle, kind, too good for someone like me. He stopped by the pond and watched the koi drift beneath the surface, flashes of gold and white and deep orange. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with you, he admitted. I don't know if I'm the right person to... His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, a text from Tanaka. We have a problem. Now. Takeshi's blood chilled. He turned and walked quickly back toward the house, one hand on the baby's back to steady her. Tanaka met him at the door, his face grim. What happened? Takeshi asked. Zhao's men hit 3 of our operations simultaneously. Dock warehouse, underground casino, the safe house on 5th. They took everything. Cash, product, records. 12 of our people are in the wind. Takeshi's jaw clenched. Casualties? 5 dead, 8 wounded. And our response? The captains are ready to move. They're asking for permission. Takeshi looked down at the baby strapped to his chest. She was watching him with those wide, unblinking eyes. No, he said. Tanaka stared. Boss? I said no. We can't just let him. I know what we can't do. Takeshi's voice rose, sharp and sudden. The baby flinched. He forced himself to breathe, lowered his voice. I know, but if we escalate now, this turns into open war. And in a war, everyone loses. Then what do we do? Takeshi was silent for a long moment. Then, set up a meeting. With Zhao? Yes. Tanaka's eyes widened. He'll never agree. He will. Because he wants something, and he thinks I have it. The meeting was arranged for neutral ground. An old warehouse on the industrial pier, abandoned for years but still structurally sound. Castellano, the same fixer who'd brokered their truce 7 years ago, served as mediator. Takeshi arrived with Tanaka and 4 guards. Vincent Zhao arrived with twice that. The 2 men stood on opposite sides of a rusted shipping container, 20 feet apart. Castellano stood between them, looking older and more tired than Takeshi remembered. Gentlemen, the fixer began, we're here to... I know why we're here, Vincent interrupted. His voice was smooth, controlled, but there was something coiled beneath it, something dangerous. Takeshi studied his rival. Vincent Zhao looked the same as he had 7 years ago. Sharp suit, cold eyes, the kind of stillness that came from absolute confidence. But there was something new in his expression. Something hungry. You've been hitting my operations, Takeshi said calmly. Have I? Don't waste my time. Vincent smiled. You're right. I have. And I'll keep hitting them until you give me what's mine. I don't have anything of yours. Liar. The word hung in the air between them. Takeshi's pulse didn't quicken. He'd known this moment was coming. You have my daughter, Vincent said quietly. There it was. Takeshi's face remained blank. I don't know what you're talking about. A baby, mixed race, found near a dump 2 weeks ago, wrapped in a scarf that belongs to my family. Vincent took a step forward. You took her, and I want her back. Takeshi didn't move. Even if I had found a child, which I'm not confirming, what makes you think she's yours? Because the woman who gave birth to her told me. And you believe her? I had her followed. I know she left the baby where you'd find it. I know you took her to your estate. I know you've been keeping her there. Vincent's eyes were black and empty. So let's skip the part where you lie to me and get to the part where you hand her over. Takeshi's hands were at his sides, loose and ready. No, he said. The warehouse went very quiet. No, Vincent repeated. That child was abandoned, left to die. I saved her. That makes her mine. Blood makes her mine. Blood is an accident. Vincent's jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Takeshi's voice was cold. You didn't want her. You told the mother to get rid of her. She refused. You walked away. You don't get to come back now because it's convenient. That was before... Vincent stopped himself. Before what? Vincent's face was stone. Takeshi understood then. Something had changed. Something that made the child valuable when she hadn't been before. Whatever your reason, Takeshi said, it doesn't matter. The child stays with me. Vincent took another step forward. His men shifted behind him. You're making a mistake, Vincent said softly. Probably. I will burn your empire to the ground. You can try. For a long moment the two men stared at each other. Then Vincent turned and walked away. His men followed. Castellano looked at Takeshi with something between pity and disbelief. You just declared war, the old fixer said. I know. Over a child that isn't even yours. Takeshi thought of the baby asleep in her crib at home, the way she'd gripped his finger, the small sound she made when she was content. Yes, he said. Over a child that isn't even mine. The city began to fracture. Vincent's attacks intensified. He wasn't subtle anymore. He went after everything. Shipments, safe houses, businesses, people. Takeshi's captains begged for permission to retaliate. Takeshi gave it, but only in measure, controlled, precise. It wasn't enough. Within days, bodies started appearing, Vincent's men, Takeshi's men, neutral parties caught in the crossfire. The police stayed out of it. They always did when the wolves were feeding. At the estate, Takeshi increased security. Guards on every entrance, cameras on every corner. No one in or out without clearance. The baby, still unnamed, seemed oblivious to the chaos. She ate, she slept, she grew. Takeshi visited her every night. One evening, as he sat in the rocking chair with her in his arms, his mother appeared in the doorway. You should give her a name, Reiko said. Not yet. Why not? Because naming her makes it real. It's already real, Takeshi. He looked down at the baby. She was asleep, her tiny mouth slightly open, one fist curled against her cheek. If I name her, he said quietly, I admit that I'm willing to die for her. And I'm not sure I'm ready to make that admission. Reiko crossed the room and placed her hand on his shoulder. You already have, she said. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Kenji knocked on Takeshi's study door late one night, his face pale. Boss, we have a problem. Takeshi looked up from the reports he'd been reading. What kind of problem? I've been digging into the scarf, trying to figure out how it ended up with the baby. And? It wasn't Vincent who left her at the dump. Takeshi went very still. What? Kenji stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The scarf was stolen, 3 months ago, from a shipment meant for Vincent's household. We thought it was just a random theft. But I found the manifest. It was taken by someone inside his organization. Who? I don't know yet. But whoever it was knew about the baby, knew about the mother. And they wanted the child found. By you specifically. Takeshi's mind raced. Someone is playing us. Yes. Vincent and me both. Yes. Why? Kenji shook his head. I don't know, but someone wanted this war, and they made sure it would start exactly the way it did. Takeshi stood and walked to the window. Outside, the estate was dark and quiet, but somewhere in the city, someone was watching. Waiting. Someone who had known that a baby wrapped in a Jiao scarf and left where Takeshi would find her would ignite a conflict that could tear the entire underworld apart. Find out who, Takeshi said. I'm trying. But boss, there's something else. Takeshi turned. Kenji's face was grim. The mother, Amara Ochieng. She didn't abandon the baby. How do you know? Because I found hospital records. She was attacked. Badly. 3 weeks before the baby was born. Someone tried to kill her. Takeshi's blood chilled. Who? I don't know. But they didn't finish the job. She survived, went into hiding, and when the baby came early, she left her somewhere safe. With me. Yes. Takeshi's thoughts spun. Amara hadn't abandoned her child. She'd saved her. Someone had tried to kill her, before the baby was even born. Someone had stolen the Zhao scarf. Someone had orchestrated everything. Where is she now? Takeshi asked. I don't know. But boss, if she's still alive, she's in danger. And if Vincent finds her first. The phone on Takeshi's desk rang. Both men froze. It was Takeshi's private line. The one only 5 people in the world had access to. He picked it up. Yes? A woman's voice, accented, frightened. My name is Amara Ochieng, she said. You have my daughter. Takeshi's grip on the phone tightened. I'm listening. I didn't abandon her. I was trying to save her. From the people who tried to kill me. From the people who want her dead. Who? I don't know. But they're not Vincent. And they're not you. Her voice cracked. Please. I just want to know she's safe. Takeshi looked at Kenji, then back out the window. She's safe, he said. Thank you. Amara's voice broke. Thank you, The line went dead. Takeshi stared at the phone. Then, from somewhere in the house, the baby began to cry. Not the usual cry. Something sharper, more urgent. Takeshi dropped the phone and ran. He reached the nursery in seconds. Haruna was standing by the window, her face white, the baby clutched to her chest. Boss! Takeshi looked past her. Outside, on the lawn, stood a figure, dressed in black, face obscured, watching. Then the figure turned and disappeared into the trees. Takeshi crossed to the window and stared into the darkness. His mother appeared behind him, her voice low and certain. It's begun, she said. Takeshi pulled his phone from his pocket and called Tanaka. Lock down the estate, no one in, no one out, and find that person. He hung up. Then he turned to Haruna and held out his arms. The nurse handed him the baby. Takeshi held her close, his heart pounding. The child looked up at him with those wide, dark eyes, and for the first time he spoke the thought he'd been refusing to admit. You're mine, he whispered. No matter whose blood you carry, you're mine. The baby made a small sound. Outside, the figure was gone. But Takeshi knew. This wasn't about Vincent anymore. Someone else was hunting, and they'd just announced themselves. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She doesn't belong to you. She doesn't belong to him. She belongs to us. Takeshi stared at the screen. Then he looked down at the baby in his arms and made a decision. He would name her. He would claim her. And he would kill anyone who tried to take her. Amara Ochieng had learned to sleep with one eye open. Not literally, though some nights it felt that way. But her body had learned to stay alert even in unconsciousness, to jolt awake at the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside her room, at the creak of floorboards, at the whisper of fabric against skin. She'd been at St. Catherine's for 3 weeks now. Sister Lucia had given her a small room on the 2nd floor. Bare walls, a single bed, a window that looked out onto the street. Safe, the nun had said. For now. Amara didn't believe in safe anymore. She sat on the edge of the bed in the darkness, her hands folded in her lap, and listened to the city breathe beyond the glass. Traffic, sirens, the low hum of lives being lived in rooms just like this one, stacked on top of each other like cards in a house that could collapse at any moment. Her daughter was out there somewhere, alive. The man on the phone, Takeshi Yamada, had confirmed it. His voice had been cold, controlled, but not cruel. He'd said the baby was safe. He'd said it like he meant it. But Amara had learned that men said a lot of things. Vincent had said he'd take care of her. The men who broke into her apartment had said they just wanted to talk. Words were cheap. Safety was expensive. She touched her ribs, still tender where they had been bruised. The cut on her lip had healed, but she could still taste blood sometimes when she bit down too hard. She thought about her daughter every waking moment. What did she look like now? Had she grown? Did she cry? Did she smile? Did someone hold her when she was afraid? Amara had held her for only 20 minutes. 20 minutes after 10 hours of labor in a bathtub. Alone, terrified, bleeding onto towels she'd stolen from a hotel. The baby had come early, so small, so impossibly fragile, and for the first few seconds, she hadn't cried. Amara had thought she was dead. Then the baby had gasped, a wet, choking sound, and wailed. Amara had held her against her chest, both of them shaking, and whispered promises she knew she couldn't keep. "I'll protect you. I'll keep you safe. I'll never let them hurt you." But she had. She'd wrapped her daughter in the only thing of value she owned, a silk scarf her mother had sent from Nairobi, embroidered with patterns that meant protection and strength, and placed her in a wicker basket. Then she'd left her at the dump near the industrial district. Not because she didn't love her, because she did. The men who'd attacked her had promised they'd come back, and if they found Amara with a baby, they'd finish what they'd started. So she'd left her daughter where someone would find her, where someone good would find her. She'd prayed harder than she'd ever prayed in her life, and somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Takeshi Yamada had found her, a crime lord, a killer, a man whose name people whispered like a curse, but he'd kept her alive. Amara didn't understand it, didn't trust it, but she believed it. For now. A knock on the door. Amara's pulse spiked. She stood, her hand instinctively reaching for the kitchen knife she kept tucked under her pillow. "Amara," Sister Lucia's voice. "It's me." Amara exhaled and crossed to the door. She opened it just enough to see the nun's face, creased with worry, but kind. "There's someone here to see you," Sister Lucia said quietly. Amara's blood chilled. "Who?" "He says his name is Kenji. He says he works for the man who has your daughter." Amara's heart hammered. I told him you might not want to see him. He said to give you this." Sister Lucia held out a photograph. Amara took it with shaking hands. It was a baby. Her baby. Asleep in a white crib, wearing a soft cotton onesie, her tiny fists curled beside her face. Alive, healthy, beautiful. Amara's eyes filled. She pressed the photo to her chest and tried to breathe. "He's waiting downstairs," Sister Lucia said gently, "but you don't have to see him if you don't want to." Amara looked at the photograph again. Then she wiped her eyes and nodded. "I'll see him." Kenji was waiting in the shelter's small meeting room, standing by the window with his hands clasped behind his back. He was older than Amara expected, 60, maybe, with gray hair and a face that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. He turned when she entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kenji bowed slightly. "Miss Ochieng, thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Amara closed the door behind her and stayed near it, her arms folded. "You work for Takeshi Yamada?" "I do." "Why are you here?" Kenji's expression was unreadable. "To ask you some questions, and to offer you protection." "I don't need protection." "With respect, you do. The people who attacked you are still looking for you, and they won't stop until they find you." Amara's jaw tightened. "Who are they?" "That's what I'm trying to find out." Kenji pulled a small notepad from his jacket pocket. "You told my employer that you were attacked 3 weeks before your daughter was born. Can you tell me what happened? Everything you remember?" Amara hesitated. Then she sat down in one of the plastic chairs and told him. It had been late, past midnight. She'd been asleep in her apartment when she heard the door splinter. She'd woken to find 2 men standing over her bed. They hadn't worn masks. That was the first thing that told her she wasn't going to survive. One of them had been tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. The other had been smaller, wiry, with dead eyes. The tall one had grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out of bed. "Where's the baby?" he'd asked. I'm pregnant, she'd gasped. There is no baby yet. Don't lie to me. He'd hit her, hard, across the face. She'd tasted blood. The smaller one had started tearing through her apartment, pulling out drawers, ripping open closets, looking for something. She's not here, he'd said. Then we make sure she never is. The tall one had replied. He'd pulled a knife. Amara had fought. She'd clawed at his face, kicked, screamed, bit down on his hand hard enough to feel bone. He'd stabbed her. Not deep. Just enough to hurt. Enough to scare. You get rid of it, he'd said. Or we come back and do it for you. Then they'd left. Amara had lain on the floor, bleeding, until sunrise. Then she'd packed what she could carry and disappeared. Kenji listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then, did they say who sent them? No. Did you recognize them? No. Did they mention Vincent Zhao? Amara looked up sharply. No, but Vincent was the only person who knew I was pregnant. It had to be him. Kenji shook his head slowly. It wasn't. How do you know? Because Vincent didn't want the baby dead. He wanted her aborted. If he'd sent men, they would have dragged you to a clinic, not threatened you with a knife and left you alive. Amara's stomach turned. Then who? Someone who wanted the baby gone before she was born. Someone who knew about her. Someone inside Vincent's organization. Or someone watching it very closely. Why? I don't know yet. Kenji closed his notepad. But I will find out. Amara stood. I want to see her. I can't allow that. She's my daughter. She's in danger. And so are you. If you go to the estate, you'll lead them right to her. Them who? Amara's voice rose. Who is them? Kenji met her.